Steering Committee meeting to order for March 27, 2025. Ms. Blake Boy.
Good morning. Thank you. We have a quorum in person, and we have Dr. Zeman online this morning.
Hello, Dr. Zeman.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
With that, I'll proceed with beginning item 1 of the Executive Committee agenda. Item 1 this morning is administrative rules document related to redevelopment units. A quick reminder of what this item is and the content of it. In January, the Planning Council was asked by Commissioner Fisher via Commissioner, well, either way, Commissioner Rich asked Commissioner Fisher to bring this item forward to the Planning Council to consider revisiting the affordable housing requirement for redevelopment units. As a reminder, redevelopment units were established with the adoption of the 2017 Broward County Land Use Plan. They account for 3% of all of the county units, which at the adoption of the plan was 32,810 units. Local governments are able to apply for these units in pools of either 500 or 750, and I'll differentiate that in just a second. Those applications must come through the municipality, and they are only allowed to be applied for once the local government is below 250 remaining flexibility units. So at this point, we've had 4 applications for redevelopment units, some for 500 with no affordable housing commitment, and some for 750 where the requirement is that at least 10% of the units, so that would be 75, or in one case it was 56 because they had a lower threshold. At least 10% of the units will be restricted to low or very low affordable housing. So when the Planning Council staff, when this was brought forward and the council initiated it in January, we started talking to a couple of different people, a couple of different groups. We talked to Ralph Stone, we talked to Commissioner Rich's office just about what we could do. Can we do something to move the needle forward? Because my main concern when this came up is that 10% number is consistent with all of our other density bonus thresholds, policy 2.16.4. And, as staff, we kind of thought it would be difficult to start having a different threshold for low and very low for a specific policy. So what we've come up with and what we're proposing today that we send out to the local governments and interested parties for consideration is we revisited the threshold at 500. So at 500, this is an incentive-based policy. This is above and beyond what the county land use plan allows. So at the 500 mark, the 10% comes into play for low or very low. That's what we're proposing. And then you can still ask for 750, but at the point you ask for 750, you maintain the 10% low or very low, and then you layer on the moderate affordable housing at 10%. So it would move the needle for the commitment that cities are making as they're able to use this tool. Because at any time, local governments can go through the land use plan amendment process. So this is a tool that allows greater discretion at the local government. So that's kind of, when we balance those things, maintaining the same percentages and the consideration of moving that forward, that's what we developed. And it is for discussion purposes only. So at the point that the committee okays us, we would send it out to local governments for written comments and input.
Discussion? You think that's a good discussion? You think it's a good plan?
I'll just say that I can appreciate the intent and the desire to grow the low and very low unit count. Is it the end of the world to have 50 out of 500 units somewhere in the city be made possible? The only thing I would say is if the 500 are allotted with this condition, we're presuming that the market can deliver those low to very low units. And what if a municipality couldn't find a partner that would be willing? I think maybe the incentive of having the units where otherwise they wouldn't be would force the acceptance of the choice to take it or not take it. But all I'm saying is it does require some private willingness. Although again, the incentive is strong enough to overcome that, probably, right? So.
Yeah. Sorry, and I just forgot to add this. In the discussions with Ralph Stone, we've spent a lot of time talking about low and very low. And very low is almost never going to be naturally occurring, kind of to your point, Mayor Levy. And so we tried to keep it at least low because that allows very low, but recognizing that, without a match partnership, government funding
Yeah.
subsidies, it's completely unlikely that very low, but low is
Is
due.
that 60%
is more
anyway?
dealable. Yeah, it's up to 80%.
Up to
Low
80.
is up to 80%.
All
So
right,
it's
so that-
120, 80, and then 50.
Yes.
All right, up to 80, I think is
Yeah.
gonna.
So it's up to
gonna,
80. It's up to 80%.
Encourage the
Right.
acceptance, yeah.
So sorry to interrupt.
Mayor Gomez? Mayor Castillo?
I think that there are also some housing rules that are going to be changing by the end of April that will affect some of the conversation that we're having now. I think April 30th is the date that HUD will be making some decisions and changes on certain things with allocations, so just keeping that in mind.
Excellent, thank you. Mayor Castillo?
In my city, the major challenge is not low or very low. We actually have units that non-for-profits working in connection with the city have provided for low and very low, mostly people with disabilities of different kinds who qualify for Section 8 and that kind of thing, special populations. Challenge in my city is workforce housing. We have a huge number of young people and also seniors on the other end who need affordable units. And that's the main challenge in my city. How would this policy affect a city like Pembroke Pines where the challenge isn't low or very low, but rather workforce housing?
Ms. Blake?
In that case, my suggestion, if Pembroke Pines gets to the threshold where they're going to ask for redevelopment units, and I would also say every city is different. Not every city uses flexibility units, uses redevelopment units. I would say Pembroke Pines has been one of the more conservative cities in using those units, through the years. If the city comes to the point and they're looking to be able to use these discretionary units, they would likely want to apply for the 750 through the city to balance that piece out if that's where they see that their need is. And what would ultimately happen is if a city applies for these units, does not use the affordable housing piece, this planning council is not going to say, okay, here's your next bucket of units, right? It's what's your plan to be able to provide or, try to promote more of these opportunities. I don't think there's a clear answer, but that if I was working at the city of Pembroke Pines and thinking forward, that would be my strategy if the city needed to apply for these units.
So what if a city had, within its own consolidated plan, an approach that said, our need is for workforce housing, or our need is for this type of housing or that type of housing? How would this policy potentially conflict with the city's own planning in terms of moving forward? Or does it complement, or can it be made to complement the local consolidated planning process?
Well, I think this does complement local plans because like we were talking about, there's other tools that cities use. This is a pretty, not narrow, but this is allocations of flexibility and redevelopment units. So that allows you, if you're not using policy 216.4, to put residential uses on commercial or, commerce properties. So all of this is meant to work together. The other beauty of the administrative rules document is we are able to modify it without going through the statutory process. So it's one hearing at the Planning Council and one hearing at the County Commission. And I say that because I think it's important as we go through and we see how these policies are used, that's kind of what generates the modifications on our part. So I'm not saying it's super easy, but there's a more streamlined process to adjust that to how cities are reacting, but that's also the purpose of public comment and written comments be submitted to
Andy,
us.
do you want to say something?
Well, no, I was just going to say what Barbara's saying, that's the tool of the because it's basically, it functions as the federal, you have federal statutes, then you have the federal code that has certain administrative rules and rulemaking, but by the same token, it's an effective tool, but we're not going to be able to solve everything through administrative rules changes because we're limited in what we can do. We still have to work through the framework.
And
So-
So we're trying to max out.
And I understand that we can't solve everything. My question is, and when I'm still not, we're hovering around the answer, but I'm not hearing it yet, is whether or not cities, for example, like Plantation, or cities like Davie, or cities like Pembroke Pines, or cities like potentially Miramar, or Weston, or others, or Cooper City, other cities along those lines, and there are others that I might name, would find in this policy a conflict to the extent that their projected need and desire is for workforce housing. Would this become an obstacle or a tool to assist them in the achievement of those goals?
I believe it's more of a tool, and I also believe that's why we have a draft, we have draft policy, or not draft article change that we would send out to
So
local
that-
government. So this isn't,
That's what I was going to get to, Bar. I think this is what it's about, to really get the municipalities to weigh in on this. We're not making any rules today. Today's just saying, giving authorization to send this out to the concerned parties so we can get back those comments. I see it as a very good start draft. I think it's a great start. I like the idea there, but I see your point completely, Mayor, that there could be better. Maybe so let's get those comments back from the municipalities and the other concerned parties, and then we can look at it again and take it up and see what we really want to do with the changes.
Okay.
Mayor Gomez?
I agree with Mayor Castillo. I think that there are times when things come before us, and then we wind up saying it's this, but we don't always hear what the cities are saying,
Yep.
and then it reflects in our passage or not. So I think that, send it out, but I think when the revisions come back, I think there are at least two mayors on the dais that are saying that they're going to want to hear some ability to know that it's not for low, it can go for workforce housing, the discretion slightly in there, but let's get the comments first, but I
And
think.
I think Mayor Harden may say the same thing if he were here, and because what the need is there specifically, we were talking about the other day. So I do think, but you have very strong planning and zoning departments there too, where you have the Gene
For
buildings in
now.
Rome and-
For now.
So you're going to get real comments back.
Until some state places decide to take our rulings out.
I'm sorry, Ms. Blake Boy?
Dr. Zeman is online. Can you see him on your screen?
He's not up on our screen, I'm
I'm
sorry.
sorry. He has his hand raised. I guess we're the only ones that can see it. Sorry.
Dr. Zeman, please chime in.
How are you all? Thank you for letting me intervene here from vacation. It's our spring break, so taking a little break from the pool time. But I wanted to weigh in on this particular issue because I thought the conversation might go this way. And there's a couple factors that really, I think, come into play here. One, cities have reasonable estimates of current demand, but may not have perfect estimates of future demand. And our housing issues in Broward County are countywide. They are not just city-specific. And while any city can say, we have demand now for this, there are people who live in that city or who want to live in that city and can't. And they may not work anywhere near that city. They might work in Dade County, they may work in other places, but our county is dramatically understocked in housing. And we need very low, we need affordable, we need workforce. We need a distribution of housing. And if we balkanize our policies, into, things that are only good in certain areas, we're not going to be doing what's best for the county. And unless somebody has different evidence, all the evidence I've seen is Broward County needs massive improvement in the stock of housing. And that improvement is not just at very low or low. It's not just at affordable or workforce. It's across the board. I do not want Broward County to look like Vail, Colorado. That is not the culture we've built here. It's not the culture that the people who live here want. I'm always worried about taking what could be a very good policy for the county and breaking it into 31 pieces of policy where we argue about what's good for one part of the county when we know that we need tons of housing. That's just like, we're not building enough. I'm disappointed because, to my knowledge, Barbara, do you know how many housing units were built this year in Broward County or will be built this year?
Not this year, but I would say last year, the last couple of years, the building permits that were pulled for residential range between 3,500 and 4,500 per year.
And that data comes from the 31 municipalities?
That data comes from the building permits that are pulled through urban planning at the county. So it all goes through them. So that's where we get the data for that.
That's wonderful, but the minimum number of houses we need built in Broward County is 7,000, not 3,500 or 4,500. And we have a backlog of housing we have not built because that number you just quoted, Barbara, is the historic average going back a whole bunch of years. And I'm just going to tell you, I'm going to advocate for whatever it takes to speed up the process to allow developers to use land in a way that increases housing stock. Because that's the biggest issue facing Broward County. And, I like this policy. I think it's a great first draft. I'm always interested in municipal input on these things. But we as a council have to advocate what's good for the county. And our county is in a crisis. We're not building enough homes to keep the culture of Broward County the way it is. And so to me, I like this policy. I think it makes great sense. And given that people who live in any one city don't always work, in fact, often do not work in that city, I think that the fact that we have a countywide program for these kinds of policies is very good, because I hope we can always arrive at what's good for all people. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Zeman. Thank you for calling in on your vacation. We appreciate that. We hear you loud and clear. I do think it is time to get input on this. I think it's, like I said already, I think it's a great start. We're going to get more information from the municipalities. So without objection, I'd like to authorize Barb and her team to send this out.
Yes.
Excellent, thank you. Item 2.
Thank you.
And we're moving into now the steering committee items.
Sorry, turn my microphone on. Just a quick note, I forgot to mention this at the beginning of the meeting. Mike Jorgensen, who runs the AV for room 422, has asked us to conclude this meeting at 9:50 to allow him the transition for the 10 o'clock meeting. And then, so we'll take that 10 minutes, and then we'll start the 10 o'clock meeting, and then we'll resume this meeting at the conclusion of that, what I anticipate to be a rather quick
I
meeting.
would suggest start talking quickly.
Okay, I got it. I'm on it. Okay, steering committee items. So what you have in the book before you and what we sent out digitally is the first phase of what staff has been developing in coordination with other county staff, interested party comments that we've received, your meetings regarding the subject matter experts, and the result of those follow-up meetings that we had. So everything that you see before you today, I'm just going to go quickly through the pieces. The first memo is the first tab is the framework, and that's the document that is following you the entire way through the process. We developed the framework and the skeleton of that last summer, and we've continued to add to it and respond to it as we move through. So we moved from about a 4-page document, we're about 15 or 16 pages now, but that's the document that you can always go to find who's submitted written comments, who's given verbal comments, and where we're at in that, and how it's either going to be addressed in the plan or if it's already addressed in the plan. So you'll find notes in there also, and they'll refer you to the other sections. Section 2 is the policies, and that's our really guiding document when we're reviewing land use plan amendments, for anything from residential uses to activity centers, resiliency policies. That's where we transfer development rights. This is really where we find the authorization of what's happening in the plan. Section 2 is the definition section. Permitted uses will be the following tab. That's obviously where you find the permitted uses for every activity center that exists in Broward County, all the uses that are permitted in residential, commerce, conservation, rec and open space. Section 3 is recommended practices. Those are aspirational policies that the county supports and would like cities to support, but aren't actually required by the county plan, but they're ideas that would move us forward in the future. The next two tabs is actually a single tab. That's going to be a water storage map and the social resilience map. And those will come into play in the summary that you receive later. And then the final two tabs are support documents and comments. So support documents are anything, articles, links to articles, information that we received, a clip of the Broward County Land Use Plan map. That's what can be found under that tab. And then the comments are all written comments that were received to date of your mail out, because we received some the day after. So those aren't included today, but they'll obviously be included at the next phase of the review. So just, you'll see this at the top of a little box at the top of every page, and we kind of came up with this icon, so you can look through the documents.
It's really fantastic, by the way.
So the icons are cute, they're cool, and when you're looking through the document, you know what to look at when you're reading through. Because things that don't have an icon but are in strike-through or underline are just changes to a correction that, that we found, an agency name, things that you should pay attention to, but they're not really your priority. So this is kind of how we prioritized it for you to review this. So I hope everybody's happy with that.
We are.
And it's
I would change the icon on affordable housing to something a little less, yeah.
to something less dense?
Yeah.
I
because,
actually had a single-family
It is that
home.
image that is hurting the effort.
You think that it's hurting the effort? Okay,
The icon.
okay,
It's just, it's imagery
okay.
that, trust me, from recent experience, it's imagery that is hurting this effort.
No problem. Got it.
It is densification, it is densification though. Just to be clear, it is densification.
Yeah, I
We're not-
understand,
We're not
but-
building single-family homes everywhere.
But it's that image that is,
Put some townhouses in
Let
there.
me see what I
Everyone's
can
single-family
find
homes.
in icons. I can't make icons, but let me see what I can find.
I recommend emojis, if you don't mind.
All right, we're not going to get caught on this thing.
Actually, I think more of what's affecting people is the word affordable again. I think the whole transition has been going to attainable, because that's the problem that we're having. But it's just a recommendation. That's what a lot of things have changed to.
Mayor
and-
Gomez, I would say, I've heard that about 10 times last week too, so I don't disagree.
Yeah.
The word affordable is affecting people.
So
on
I
several
will tell
committees,
you-
and it's changing. So anyway, just.
In the last version of BrowardNext, we used attainable housing the entire way through the process until the last public hearing, and there was a change to affordable housing. So I mean, we can call it housing densification, we can call it something else, so we can change the
Housing
emoji.
densification is wonderful.
Okay, so we'll take out the word affordable, that's
Remove the
no,
word affordable, because
Okay.
that's what we're trying to do. We're creating housing.
okay, so we're trying to create housing. Okay, so we're taking notes on
And take,
this.
and
I
change
just-
the emoji to not
We're
so
changing
dense.
the emoji and
Just-
we're changing it to housing densification.
Housing
Perfect.
slash densification.
Housing slash densification.
gotcha.
Okay,
Alright.
next slide, just kidding. So,
How about housing selection? But
Housing-
it's all, it's okay.
Variety, housing variety.
Right.
We've gone
Housing
sideways.
mix,
live where you want, buy what you want, rent what you want. No, just kidding.
choice.
There's no way you can talk fast enough with this crowd. We're going to be here after the
It's
meeting.
gonna
So
be
Housing-
take your time at this.
Housing choice, like school choice, housing choice.
Housing choice. Your
I like
comments are
housing
heard and
choice.
we'll come up with something. You'll see a different version next month.
Housing densification.
What would you like to give it this?
Please don't.
Okay, so housing densification slide, the first slide. So what we've done in this presentation is this does not take you through every single change that is noted in there. These are the highlights of this. So there is more detail than what is in your, than what I'm going to be talking about today. And also to say that this is the first viewing of these and the first discussion of it. So there will still be public comment and your comment to be taken in. So I anticipate some changes to this information today that will be represented next month, along with the remainder of the items, which we'll talk about a little bit at the end, the highlighted regional issues, and the administrative rules draft, which will also come to you. And we'll format it in a way so that you can see what you saw this month compared to next month. So to get started, we're talking about single occupancy residential density calculations. And with the adoption of the last plan, we put in a half a unit for these units that are beneath 500 square feet per unit. Local governments are able to do that. We thought about expanding that policy to represent single residential occupancy. I wrote it wrong in the slide. But SRA density calculations. These are generally unrelated individuals that are living together. So we're starting at a place for that, based on some research that we did and discussions with local governments of products that they're starting to see that differentiate from the traditional products that they've seen through the years. Single rooms that share kitchens and living facilities, maybe 8 individuals, maybe 6 individuals sharing those kinds of things. So that's an updated policy. Bonus density, additional opportunities for bonus density in policy 216.3, moving the needle on the maximum available. Right now, it's limited to 50 units per acre if you have a residential land use. So moving the needle, moving the dial on that forward, and where can we look for these opportunities to for densification? Policy 216.4, known as the Geller policy, we're kind of at a hold on that. After I talked to you in December, the steering committee, we sent some information directly to Senator Geller for his consideration and let him, know he's been on the mailing list. I had a meeting with him, and he started another working group for policy 216.4, and that's expanded to a couple of other topics that we're going to touch on today. So we generally, aside from a correction in that policy, we're not proposing anything until he has the feedback from that committee, which may be by summer. I'm not really
Makes sense.
positive of that. Policy 216.5 was just adopted in 2023, and that was for government-owned lands that are designated community or on the county plan. So that would be community facilities used generally on a city plan. Expansion of that to faith-based facilities, and then modifying the maximum density. I think we're going to see a big movement on this to really to city zoning codes and what they would allow. So right now, we have it limited to 50 dwelling units per acre, and we also added in a piece where it actually, not just in arterial, but city-owned roads, access to those. So we're not talking about in the middle of neighborhoods, because I think that's one of the real concerns. But, we have a map that we reference that has also city collectors on there, and that provides access to these parcels. And I think that's very important when we're talking about affordable housing opportunities. Access not just to the roadway system, but potentially transit and other opportunities. Permitted uses section, we had some discussions about modifying accessory dwelling units to eliminate the affordable housing affidavit requirement, which was very difficult to ensure that that was occurring anyway, but provide the cities the tools and making sure that that option's available at the county level also. Then the intergovernmental summary features additional incentives related to densification. Transportation and mobility. This slide is.
Does anyone have any questions on the urban density housing?
As we go through the policies, can you tell me, just in terms of this initial introduction to the policy language insertions here with the items that are highlighted and or underlined in all the various policy numbers, what the outlook is for this process? We're seeing it for the first time here at the steering committee, so where does it go from here?
Where does it go from here?
Yeah.
So you're going to have another steering committee meeting with more updates to this, because I was just getting ready to say transportation and mobility, we still have policies that we're addressing. We're still working on the highlighted regional issues. So you're going to have these back-to-back steering committees, and then we're going to do a series of workshops based on your input and all of these documents that are holistic after the April meeting. We have, I was going to talk about this at the end, a series of workshop dates in May for public input and comment, and then we'll be able to bring this back to you either June, July as a steering committee, and it looks like should be able to go to the county, to the planning council for first public hearing or for the recommendation to the county commission. So that looks like it would be August.
So I'm glad that there's a lot of process ahead, because some of these policies and the tightening of, for example, policies that are, looking to further restrict where we can grow and how we can grow, whether it's using, environmental recreation, proximity to environmental or recreational areas, or, mention of flood-prone areas, which a lot of the county is. And to the point that Dr. Zeman brought up before, where it's a county that really needs a lot of additional new housing units, seems like a lot of these policies are further restricting where new housing units can be, for whatever rationale there might be. And I think that ignores our ability to adapt and build in a way that's compatible for the needs of the county, that facilitates the needs of the county, and at the same time, is consistent with how to build and where to build sustainably and with environmental responsibility, and with regards to, adapting to flood risk and things of that nature. So I'm just, as I'm glancing through it, I'm seeing this real, I guess you could say, dichotomy between the need to grow and here policies that are looking to restrict growth. So, not all of them, but some of them.
Sure, and I think that, so this is a draft, and also I had an idea that I was going to ask about Dr. Corrado or Dr. Mount, having them available at your next committee meeting for some of these more detailed discussions, if need be, and Ralph Stone, I have them on call for the next meeting date, once we determine that, if it's going to be at the Planning Council meeting day or a different day.
So I do think it's probably we're going to need more time. We're going to need to schedule that meeting so we can ask all these questions. I think what this is about today is introducing what we're proposing, and then let's go through it between now and our next meeting, and then really highlight what we don't like, and let's hash through it so we can then give some direction to Barb and her team. Councilmember.
Thank you. I'll be quick. I know we have the deadline at 9:50. I hear what you're saying, Mayor Levy, and I think that's why this is a great starting point. When I'm looking at what's happening, I was in Tallahassee last week, what's happening with the legislature, I think that's the nature of planning, right? We need to obviously increase that housing stock, but we also are tasked with trying to preserve our sense of place in our cities and the character of our cities while doing that simultaneously. I was speaking to Ms. Blake Boy earlier when we talk about faith-based properties. One of the bills moving through right now with Rep. Lopez out of Miami would allow for unlimited densification on a faith-based property in a single-family neighborhood without public input. So those are some of the things that we're pushing back against. So I think that we certainly need those guidelines, so it may look like we're restricting growth, but I think that it's important for us as a county to make sure that we have those guidelines in place so that we don't lose our cities.
Yeah, well, I don't think we're at any threat of that being the reality, considering that much of the county has been built out for decades. And I will say that I think the consequence of local decision-making that restricts growth and creates a shortage of supply leads to the state preemptions that now want to go wholesale and say, well, these cities are run amok or these counties are run amok. We need to impose the rules to let people have a place to live. So, and I'm not suggesting that Broward County has been that way and is, so I just want us to remember that, when we go too strict, the state might override and say, hey, we'll take control, so.
Mayor Gomez.
Don't look scared, I promise. It's not, well, I'll wait for the next meeting for you all to be scared. There are some other issues I see in here for a quick read. As it's just been said, we're just seeing this. I would like to ask you to, we've seen it, but some of us have not been able to read through it since we received it with what we've had going on. So we can digest it now. But if you would also give us the slides, because the slides are in a different order than what our book is. So admittedly, looking, unless I've missed something. Okay.
Right, because we're trying to give an overview kind of by topic. And
Right,
we
but
can
it's
certainly
just
go
go back and
through-
forth
Okay.
on, yeah, because there's a little bit more in the book than the
Well, there's
overview
much
on the
more.
screen. So like, for example, the parking item, which I don't know if, you know what I mean, like, so if you would, just so we can have the slides when we are reviewing it, it'll help some of us go back and forth a little bit better for our review. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, so transportation, mobility. So in this, related to this topic, really, I think a lot of the feedback that we've been getting and hearing is prioritization of other modes over vehicles, right? So how do we incorporate it into the plan? So the policies that you see before you today are these highlights. There's more coming. This is we have more pending. But really focusing in the activity center policies on interconnectivity and really calling out pedestrian, bicycle, and transit usage. Encouraging, obviously, increased density along transportation and transit corridors, which was in the plan, but really highlighting that as a priority. Supporting the coordination, tying the school issue that Mayor Castillo brought back several months ago. How can we just support that in the county plan? Because I think at the end of the day, we're not able to facilitate it, but we can support it and encourage that way. Prioritizing zero traffic fatalities and serious injuries, drawing in the county's safety action plan as part of the complete streets policies and making that becomes the first policy in that section. So calling out that that's the priority for the county and how those things move forward. What we anticipate as we move into the next discussions is really a relationship to level of service analysis and how that works, and can we consider a quality level of service and combine that, because it's kind of, can there be a hybrid approach to those analyses? So that's what we anticipate seeing in the next version. Resiliency is the next topic. We have 3 slides on this, and this is, I think, what Mayor Levy was touching on. There are some very strong recommendations and suggestions in there, but obviously this is the first draft, waiting for comment, public comment, and planning council comment. A move to really focusing on water storage needs during the review of golf course amendments. It's a policy that came into play in 2008, modernizing that to ensure that that's addressed as part of stormwater management. Strengthening fracking details in that policy, because when we went through it, was it really addressing? And we saw the county was approached several years ago, and the cities fighting against the opportunity in the Everglades. So strengthening that policy to ensure that it's modernized to address all forms of fracturing that way. Then modifying, really looking at, instead of site planning details, because the county plan, we've talked about this over and over again. This isn't a zoning plan, it's not a site planning plan. Trying to remove that element, but what plans and policies do we have? It's 950. That's our cutoff, but I'll just finish this final thought before we break for the meeting. How do we ensure that the climate change action plan and the regional climate action plan, those policies, those plans are really where the development and redevelopment techniques kind of fall into. So refocusing that policy to move away from site planning and really on policy documents is the idea behind that. Break.
With that, we will adjourn.
Break until 10
and then
o'clock.
we'll pick up again.
And then pick back up at the conclusion of that meeting. Thank you for everyone's patience.
Thank you.
Good morning. Today's Broward County Planning Council meeting is scheduled to begin at 10 o'clock a.m., about 5 minutes from now. For those of you in the audience, please silence or turn off your cell phone. Ladies and gentlemen, today's Planning Council meeting is scheduled to begin in 3 minutes. Good morning. The Broward County Planning Council meeting will begin in 1 minute. For those of you in the audience, please silence or turn off your cell phone at this time. Welcome to the Broward County Planning Council Monthly Meeting, webcast live from the Broward County Government Center, located in downtown Fort Lauderdale, Florida. The fundamental role of the council is to promote coordinated, comprehensive, long-range planning throughout Broward County through the joint cooperation and participation of local governments, public officials, and private citizens. And now, the monthly meeting of the Broward County Planning Council.
Mayor Rex Harden. Councilmember Denise Appleby Horland. Mayor Josh Levy.
Here.
Commissioner Letitia Newbold.
Here.
Vice Mayor Jackie Raley. Mr. David Rosen.
Also online. Sorry, I have it right here, so.
Jackie is online also.
Thank you. Mr. David Rosenoff.
Here.
Mayor Michael J. Ryan.
Present.
School Board Member Alan Zeman. Mr. Thomas H. DeGiorgio Jr.
I'm here, and I think Dr. Zeman, he was just online our steering committee, so I'm not sure if he got off by any chance. But he said he was going to be online.
Okay,
so-
I'll text him and ask him.
Okay, so, excellent, thank you, Karen. Okay, Ms. Blake Boy.
Good morning, thank you. For the consent agenda, the only addition on the final agenda is Mayor Hardin. He's in Washington DC this morning. He's going to hop on Zoom if he's available, but he has the excuse absence request in an abundance of caution. And then I would just add that Ms. Fernandez contacted me yesterday that she needed to be out of town and was going to try to be on Zoom, but I don't see her on here.
Okay,
Those are the only additions.
excellent.
Motion to move the consent items?
We have a motion from Mayor Levy, second from Mayor Brunson. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Item R1, council report. Andy.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I have sent probably several items to you with regard to focusing on one piece of legislation that is making its way through the legislature in the state of Florida. There are others. I will, at the next meeting, will update you on those and probably update you on these. But one of particular note, because of the importance for Broward County and the state, obviously state as a whole, is HB 943. There are other similar bills that are dealing with similar issues, so hopefully they'll get into one, I was going to say one big beautiful bill, but one bill, and they'll make their way into one bill. This is, as I said, I characterize it as breathtaking in its scope. This has a lot of changes. I'm just going to touch on a few of them because you want me to stop talking after a while because of the news I'm bringing. To encourage, the whole concept here is to encourage the development of affordable housing, obviously a laudable goal. This is the third iteration of the Live Local bill, and I think it's probably the most aggressive attempt yet. One, with regard to, and this has effects outside of the affordable housing, the definition of compatibility, and this is important for our work here in your comprehensive plan, because this is part of Chapter 163, has been revised to basically say, to say that residential is always compatible with residential, no matter what the character of the residential, no matter what the intensity of the residential. Residential is always compatible with residential. This could have effects on a lot of different areas. A second thing that was in Chapter 163 is a very strong advocacy of accessory dwelling units in single-family homes. They have to be allowed. So there are a number of issues. Those who deal it on the more, those of us who have dealt on the more granular level and at the cities are going to have to grapple with this because there are a number of issues. And then, as you recall, the Live Local started with just saying it applied in commercial and industrial zoning districts, which was the starter. Now it says that really Live Local applies to any site owned by a municipality, a school district, or a religious institution. Live Local can apply with no, for instance, if a religious, and I have, for instance, like the Catholic Church owns loads of properties that they haven't, I mean, just, it's amazing the properties that you find that the Catholic Church owns in the county. It's a religious, owned by a religious institution, Live Local applies. They don't have to continue to hold it. There's no restrictions on alienation after they develop it. So you can see what that opens up. It applies to any area that's owned. Now there has been there's been questions by some. It says, presently it says commercial and industrial is Live Local territory. So we've just added one with the owned by municipalities and religious institutions. They've added two more, mixed use and plan unit developments. So anything that's as a plan unit development is open for a Live Local development. And then the biggest one is a Live Local development is permitted, all these regulations are permitted in any area residential area which is not zoned exclusively for single-family and duplex use. So live local now, so pretty much in almost every zoning district other than a exclusive single-family and duplex is open for live local. So it's greatly expanded, I mean, if this is passed, of course. Additionally, if there is an adjacent parcel to any one of these, live local could apply to that. So a lot of questions could be raised on how this would be applied. I mean, but you can see the scope of it. And this was found in a lot of cases, and I think the lawyers are going to among us are going to have a good time with this. It prohibits a municipality from taking action that directly or indirectly. Now, what do they mean by indirectly? Obviously, if you did some environmental regulation, resiliency regulations, all of that indirectly affect that. But you cannot do anything indirectly or directly that restricts the density of a live local project below the density of July 2023. Coincidentally, the effective date of the first Live Local Act. So any city that was reacted and did something. The same thing with regard to maximum lot size. And then it restricts maximum lot coverage to 70%, nothing below 70%. And it restricts the floor area ratio to nothing below 150% of what was in effect on July 2023. It prohibits any quasi-judicial proceedings in the approval process. We know it's administrative anyway, so they've already excluded the city commission, the county commission. Now they're excluding quasi-judicial process, which is really, now this will be a state law, but it's contrary to the state law determined by the Supreme Court of Florida in the right to a quasi-judicial proceeding. So there's some interesting concepts there. It imposes a mandatory requirement. You must reduce parking by 20%. And if the development is less than 20,000 square feet, they have no parking requirement. So it's 100% reduction.
Next year, there's going to eliminate permitting.
It authorizes, now there's obviously, the lawyers got, this is definitely had a lawyer being drafted it, the attorney's fees provisions. So we have to make sure the attorneys get paid. And then, so in any challenge, so the attorney fees are going to be an issue, which will greatly up the cost, as you can imagine. And it preempts any decision or action taken by a municipality that directly or indirectly limits height, floor area ratio, or density of a live local project. So you step up, again, the indirectly. So, look, we're all clever on these things as attorneys and administrators and zoning people. When we saw the first Live Local Act, it just dealt with a few areas, right? Height. I said, don't worry about that. You can adopt other regulations that'll make the height irrelevant. Well, they've caught on to that. And so now, anything that directly or indirectly limits height, floor area ratio, or density of a live local project, illegal. Any regulation which directly or indirectly unreasonably delays the development or construction of a live local act, illegal. Any regulation which directly or indirectly restricts the manner in which affordable units are assessed or developed, or which regulates the types of unit in the project, that's illegal. And then, if that wasn't enough, they have it covered. Any regulation which directly or indirectly restricts or limits a live local project in any other way. They could have just said everything, but there are regulations, again, if, for instance, if a city wanted to adopt a moratorium or zoning in progress while we kind of hit us with a lot here, give us 6 months, 6 months zoning in progress, a moratorium is generally held okay. No go here. And if they challenge it, they have a right to attorney's fees. It creates a specific cause of action for projects adversely affected by any moratorium. So those are the highlights of the act. It's you know, obviously it's a huge problem, and this is the third iteration, and it's again the most aggressive.
Quickly.
Councilmember Holland.
We'll be keeping up. I'll keep you further apprised as we go.
Thank you, Andy. So this is the bill that I referenced in our earlier meeting, Rep. Lopez's bill out of Miami 943. It did pass through committee with only one no vote on Tuesday. I had spoken to many of the committee members. Our Broward delegation voted up, as often they do, to try to make the bill better. My response was there's not a lot that can be done to make this bill better. In my opinion, it's one of the worst land use bills to come out of the legislature. So I'm urging my residents, I'm urging others to weigh in on this, because not only does it take away the local control, but it takes away the voice of our residents. And when I talk about the sense of place, yes, we need to deal with affordability, but this is just no holds barred. And I use the example in the city of Plantation. We have a more rural area, Plantation Acres, which is basically 1 acre lots. People can have horses out there. There are 6 religious institutions within Plantation Acres. And what I said to the residents the other day, you could have unlimited density in a high-rise next to your horses at this point. So we're really trying to get people involved, and if anybody wants to weigh on this bill, I think that we need to.
That's a
So
great
thank
point,
you, Mr. Chair.
Councilmember Holland. Thank you for that. Andy, you did a fantastic job with this memo and the backup. I would urge you to share this memo with those concerned parties, make sure they all see what's actually happening if they're not aware of it, and get your constituents involved. I mean, truly, this is a big deal, so.
Yeah, it's a good point, Mr. Chair, because especially for the commissioners and mayors here, local government officials and county officials, to make your public aware of it, because once this is passed, I don't think they'll understand that you're forced. You know, you always say, we have to do this. The citizenry is generally not really, they don't really like that. So I think you need to kind of prepare them for what might come down the way. Because as a local government, governing body official, you kind of lose a lot of your thought. I mean, you can't even vote on it.
Yeah,
I mean-
that's really the importance here. It's really just get the word out. Mayor Gomez.
I'll be good.
You can't do anything else.
Unconstitutional, unduly burdensome, overbroad, unconstitutional, and then to put duress and stress where we are not allowed to fight them or fight anybody, because we'll have attorney fees on us, also inappropriate. So there's got to be a stop to this before it even goes any further.
Yep.
My only 2 cents.
We completely agree, and that's why I want everyone to get involved with this. Really take it back to your constituents. Let everyone read this memo. It's really well put together. Andy, thank you for doing that. And we agree with your sentiments. I'm not an attorney.
When, oh, I'm sorry.
Go right ahead.
I just started speaking.
Mayor Castillo.
In my formative government years when I worked in New York City, there was a practice there that I think is sometimes followed in Florida, that certain laws only apply to counties over 1 million residents. And that has occasionally been used in Florida, but not nearly to the extent that it should, very often to the lament of counties over 1 million, because they are unable to overcome the objections of the vast majority of counties in Florida, which are rural. This actually, separate and apart from what our feelings are and what our beliefs are, they're strong, and understandably so here in large urban counties. This actually threatens rural counties much more than it threatens
That's a very good point.
urban counties. And so it's sort of interesting that this would be a statewide law with applicability to counties as diverse as Miami-Dade and Holmes, or Miami-Dade and Volusia, or Glades. It's sort of interesting that they chose to do it that way. Usually things of this magnitude take a couple of tries to get over the finish line. I don't know what the sentiment is up there for it. But if it comes our way, it sort of maybe speaks to the frustration that has existed in large urban counties, resisting the need for this housing. At the end of the day, a project can't be affordable unless it pencils out. And that's not going to change. No one's going to change the land use, the land value, or the construction costs associated, or what you have to overcome in order to make a project pencil out to affordable rents. So that aspect of it is not going to change. So I think we just have to sort of understand it in that context. I don't know what else to say. This is a soccer ball that we've been kicking around for decades.
Thank you, Mayor Castillo. We'll say this, all these things, just to your point where you said land, this does change everything, right? Land values will change because of it, because now it's
Yeah.
different. So this does change, where we have proposed mixed use, where we've thoughtfully designed our communities, that will change because it's now allowed to happen without any recourse. So we have to be really, the unintended consequences, long-term for economic development planning are significant. With that said, please just take this memo back, take what we've heard today back to your constituents, to those in other commissioners that you have, and get the word out there and get them on their state representatives. Okay, Andy, you had one more thing?
Oh, yes.
You're welcome.
It's just after R1.
Thank you. Yes, just for your, there's a FYI packet of a proposed legislation with regards to the issue of the school board and what we remember that you dealt with Oakland Park with the impact fee agreement, et cetera. It's just an attempt, it's not here for discussion or action or anything, but just so you know, as you recall, this board sent a letter of concern with regard to what was happening in that situation. And this is, part of the working through by the parties involved of a possible process to resolve that issue. So just wanted to be you to be aware it's alive and action is being suggested on that by various parties.
Yeah, that's great, and our letter still stands, it's out there, so thank you. Okay, Ms. Blake Boy.
Good morning, thank you. I don't have any items except for an update of where we're at with the BrowardNext process and public input and the steering committee. Just before this meeting this morning, we had our first portion of our BrowardNext steering committee to talk about the draft language, the first phase of that. And we're getting some feedback from the committee members this morning, and we're definitely going to be having the next phase of that discussion and probably consideration of a third meeting, just on the break, talking to the chair about how it's going to kind of work out. So basically, staff has been taking all of the input that we received to date, as well as a framework document, and has started drafting policy, permitted uses changes, definitions, updates, anything that, we received comments on that the steering committee gave us direction through that framework document. And then if it's not something that we've addressed, we've also put in the framework document the rationale behind why it's not addressed, or what our research or additional input has showed us. So what we have been planning from staff's perspective is to begin a series of workshops at the conclusion of the steering committee's work. So I think that'll be delayed a couple of weeks, but we have some dates in May and June that we'll be advertising, and we'll have in-person as well as virtual workshop opportunities. And this will all be distributed to the interested parties. Our constant contact emails that you receive, everyone gets those emails. Everything is posted on the BrowardNext website, so there's always access to the information there if you're looking to see what has been happening so far. So really, we're at this discussion point with the steering committee. We're looking, I believe, at an August public hearing for the planning council. That could go to September, just based on a shift for this. I had already shifted it, but, time will tell. And we're still looking at completing this process by spring of 2026. And I think that that's still in the future. We're just at a point where there's actual content to discuss, and everyone has input and wants to add their take on the policies. So we'll be working through that the next several weeks and months. And that's, if anyone has any questions about BrowardNext.
Thank you, Ms. Blake-Boyd.
And then I would just add, we have 3 public hearing items today, PH 1, 2, and 3. They are all recertifications of local plans. PH 1 is a quasi-judicial for the city of Sunrise for their Metropica Activity Center. They're invoking the local increase of residential uses and office uses there, and that's why it's quasi-judicial. And then items 2 and 3 are Dania Beach and Lighthouse Point. The quasi, did I say, is waived for 1, and staff recommends that each of these items is in substantial conformity with the Broward County Land Use Plan. Item 2 is recommended for provisional recertification with 1 year to address the deficiencies in the plan. And there are no speakers assigned from the local governments or applicants signed in to speak.
Excellent. Entertain a motion.
So moved.
For which?
All of it.
So you're moving PH 1, PH 2, PH 3.
And
Yes.
2 as amended with, yes.
And I'm going to heartily second that.
Excellent. So we have a motion for PH 1, 2, and 3 by Mayor Gomez, a hearty second from Mayor Castillo. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Any other items, Ms. Blake-Boyd?
That concludes the business for the regular council meeting, unless there's any planning council member comments. And we will have a 10-minute break before we
Next
go
meeting.
back to the return to the steering committee
Are we
discussion.
having a meeting in April?
Yes, I actually have the future agenda right before me for April. It looks like we've been notified that a natural resource map series amendment, they're asking to move forward. We're not sure. We sent it to the county staff for their comment. That could make it back on for April. And then we have the budget for FY '26. We're still waiting for that from the Office of Management and Budget. So if we have that, there's a chance there may not be an April meeting. No.
Okay.
There's always a chance. Right now, I mean, we're looking at an April meeting, we have content, but the next week, week and a half really will tell us what we're going to receive in a timely manner to be able to advertise for those items.
Thank you, Ms. Blake-Boyd. Anything else for the good of the order?
Yes, I want you to know that as vice chair here, I have assigned myself the responsibility of touring the city of Barcelona in April.
Outstanding.
And I wish to, I want to understand how they're dealing with affordable housing and traffic there, so we can finally get it right here. And
Good luck to you.
so if there is no meeting in April, that will work for me. But if not, I will call in for the meeting.
Really?
Yeah.
That's really nice. That's
I do-
really nice.
I do take it seriously.
I like it. Anything else? We are moved to adjourn. Oh, Commissioner Newbold.
Oh,
Hold that.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I don't know if you asked if we had additional questions regarding the legislative update.
Yeah.
But I have one question.
Sure.
Regarding, because I also know that they are returning unspent federal dollars. Is that also including like grants that was awarded to cities that have not been, they have not spent the monies yet?
I don't know about that. Yeah, I don't microphone. Andy, microphone. Now, which specific fund, I'm having trouble also hearing.
In the news, the last couple of days, you saw, what was it, $863 million were returned to federal monies that the state
Oh,
returned.
oh.
So I think that's what you're referring to, Commissioner Newbold?
Yeah, I do not know the details of that particular thing. So I could try to get that information for you if you'd like.
Okay, please,
That'd
thank
be
you.
great. Ms. Blake-Boyd.
Sorry, Dr. Zeman texted me that he had his hand raised, but I can't see from the view of that he had his hand raised, so I don't know if he's still online.
I can't see it. I can't see his hand raised, so I didn't see it either. I apologize. But if he's online,
Hey, Chair, how are you?
Dr. Zeman, welcome back.
Look, if I'm going to give up pool time, I at least want to throw in 5 cents, Chair.
Absolutely.
Hey, there's a couple really critical pieces about Live Local. One, as our attorney pointed out, don't be cute with the House. The House had very specific intent in the original Live Local, and municipalities and counties played cute. And Danny Perez doesn't like people playing cute with him. And so now we're going to eat Live Local this year, and I'm all about fighting for it. There's no problem there. But sometimes you got to deal with the consequences of adolescent behavior, and that's how he views what has happened for the past year. To Mayor Castillo, who I respect and love his points on this, yeah, projects have to pencil out, but right now the county is subsidizing those projects $50 million a year, and Commissioner Rich is trying to double that to $100 million. That's a pretty big market distortion, and if she is in fact successful getting additional dollars spent on that, it'll continue to make those the financials for those things different. But the other thing that changes financials is when the supply of development land changes. And this dramatically increases the value of land that is held by churches or school boards or municipalities because of the density that can go on there. And so given that this is a dramatic increase in supply, it's going to inevitably have a decrease in the overall price of housing, which is exactly what we'd like. And as we all know, the marketplace is a lot stronger than any government action in the housing market. And so the Live Local Act has a lot of unappealing features to it. One of the consequences, though, is it may lower the cost of housing in urban districts in particular. So I don't like this bill. There's a lot of pieces of it that are just stinky. But I think we have to be kind of clear-eyed about how we got to this point, which is we ignored legislative intent and tried to be way too cute with things like floor area ratios and things like that to get around their rules. And I just think in general, you know, you can do that, but you're taking a big risk. And now we're seeing the consequences of those kinds of decisions. Thanks a lot for letting me share my 2 thoughts.
Thank you, Dr. Zeman. Enjoy your vacation. Commissioner Fisher.
Hey, Dr. Zeman, Lamar Fisher, how are you?
Rocking and rolling.
I just want to clarify, when you talked about Commissioner Rich asking for $50 million, the commission has always allocated $20 million towards the trust fund. She has also advocated for 90% of the CRA dollars to go back to affordable housing, and that has not been successful the last couple of years. I don't know where the $50 million came from, but the $20 million is a reality number that in the last few years we have put aside for the trust fund dollars for the affordable housing.
Thank you for the clarification, Commissioner Fisher.
Thanks so much. I'm just going by what Commissioner Rich told me. So,
thank you, Commissioner Fisher. Any further comments? Do you have a motion, Commissioner Fisher?
Adjourn, buddy.
Motion to adjourn. We're adjourned. Thank you.
We're back.
You got the gavel, the big
Oh, the big gavel. There you go. That looks dangerous. I don't break the dais.
So who sits here normally? I wanted to know. We're so low and rock. I should probably watch the council meeting, sorry.
Okay, we're ready to start the
Mayor, council member, we ready? Everybody?
steering
Ready?
committee.
Ready to go? Mayors? Good. All right.
Okay.
Please pick up where we left off.
Picking up where
Thank
we
you.
left off. We were moving to the bottom half of the slide, climate resiliency, adaptation action areas, and priority planning areas policies. So this is an entire section that exists in the county plan, primarily related to adaptation action areas. And what the highlights of these proposed policy changes are policy changes for when amendments come through the Broward County Land Use Plan Amendment cycle, and new corresponding natural resource map series related to two items. The one map is related to social resiliency map. Those are areas of the county that are found to contribute to additional flood or heat risk within the basin. So there are areas that are at a higher risk than the remainder of the county. We're going to flash to a depiction of that map in just a second. And then the second natural resource map series that's proposed is related to water storage map. And the same thing, to guide redevelopment opportunities and water management investments throughout the county. So there's a policy piece, and then there will be a natural resource map series. Could be, if the policies are moved forward, and these are the corresponding maps. And what I was talking about with Dr. Jurado and Dr. Mount coming to a future meeting to go into really the detail of the impacts of these. But they would operate similarly to the priority planning area map, which is up to 3 feet of sea level rise by 2070. And if you have an amendment that is kind of targeted on there, you're subject to additional policies for the local governments and for developers to address. The water storage map comes down to kind of like a net community effect, how you're creating or ensuring water storage in your property, and it's tied down. I think it's 100-acre. It's broken into 100-acre pieces throughout the county. So it's how redevelopment opportunities could positively impact that, and then the same for the social resiliency map. So those would be two policy considerations, and then these are the corresponding maps. So one wouldn't happen without the other. So if if it's social resiliency supported and water storage isn't, then the policy piece would be in and the map would be in, but not the other policy and map.
If I could, Chair. Just a question maybe to Andy. To what extent, if policies were so restrictive that they would result in the inability of a property owner to redevelop their property, at least within the development rights that zoning might provide, does it get to a point where if it's impossible through, let's just call it water storage requirements, that there is there a legal consequence to rules that basically?
So that's a great question,
Yeah.
and I didn't address that detail. So how these policies are currently structured are really to allow you to move forward. If you are unable to accommodate the water storage on your site, there's an idea behind not an impact fee, but some sort of fund that you could pay through for the county that would move you forward from that. So it's not a stop. There's a stopgap measure. So there's a measure that you can move forward, and that's part of when we talked about BrowardNext and adopted it in 2017. When Henry Sneezek, which some of you may remember, he was my counterpart, at the Planning Council. He was the director, and then he moved over to the county side. He and I had always talked about, could there be a possibility of a fund that was set up for resiliency planning and to try to start funding some of these opportunities too. So that would be the idea. So it wouldn't be a stopping point. There would be, as it's laid out in the policy, I have it actually tabbed 2.21.6. That's where you find all of these policies. It talks about the alternatives to that in the policy today.
Yeah,
So
we'll just say
there's-
the consequence of too restrictive,
Right, so
a regimen
exactly
would
for-
result in existing property staying the way it is. And so if we want to redevelop and have more uses that, contribute to the community's modernization, I'll use that word, then, again, the consequence of saying no to things is, okay, it's going to stay the way it is. So we need to decide as a county, where that fine line is, and like you said, there's mechanisms, I haven't looked at them yet, but just, to putting out there to anybody listening that we need to be mindful of those things.
Generally, the
good
county
point.
plan has always been structured for, buyout is the wrong word, but there's a path, there's generally been a path forward. It's been managed that way, whether it's for affordable housing or densification, transportation impacts, finding a path forward for applicants, for developers and cities.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks.
Mayor Levy, do you want?
No, I was going to ask a Bert Harris question, but I'll let it go.
I will defer to Andy for that. Anyway.
All Bert Harris questions will be dealt with privately at the end of the meeting.
Ms. Blake Boy.
But with only one planning council member at a time.
Thank you.
Okay.
We're still on resiliency, right?
We are.
We're still on, we have one more resiliency slide, yes.
Can I just,
You may.
this might be something for, it's sort of a little bit far afield, well, not really, but it's more operational in nature. I don't know if Dr. Gerardo is generally aware of this, but you remember when we had Tropical Storm Eta, and we had the difficulty transporting water along the canals because they were backing up? So the South Florida Water Management District is now dredging some of the canals, because what happens is that sediment builds up from rotting plant material and all this other kind of stuff. And what they're finding is that there's up to, in some cases, 2 to 3 feet of additional capacity to hold water. That is a huge amount of water. And I don't know if that exists in some of our older lakes. I don't know if that exists, and it's difficult to do after the fact. But some of this material, if removed, vastly improves the ability of our existing water structures to contain water. And I'm not sure from an engineering perspective or from an environmental review perspective who's looking at that. Obviously, anything along those lines would be disruptive to fish and that kind of thing. And, but once upon a time, when we had less rain, certainly the structures that we had were engineered to be sufficient to contain the water that we generate. And I don't know if anyone, are you aware if anyone is looking at this issue of the depth of our water structures and their current reduced capacity because of maintenance issues to
Without
improve?
speaking for Dr. Gerardo, I feel 100% confident that she would be aware of this. She's going to come to one of your future meetings, so we can talk about the structure kind of how that would
Could you
work too.
ask her specifically with the volume and the holding capacity, if that's been looked into with the models that they're running right now with the sea level rise, has that been taken into consideration?
Because that might be part of the answer, and if it is, then drainage districts really sort of have to start, at least in my city, we don't own really lakes. They belong to the drainage districts. They need to start taking a look at, in what ways they can restore those to the original capacity.
Mayor, I think that's a very good point. I think every municipality has that issue. I mean, going back, whether you're on the water, not on the water, just the drainage canals that have been dug, for sure. So that's a very good point. I'm almost guessing there's somebody's modeled that appropriately, but let's just verify that.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you. For the last resiliency update for today, policies including heat mitigation, including those concepts in the county plan. And we have strong policies for greenways and alternative trails, and how do we address those for future climate conditions? So there's some ideas to providing amenities along those trails and just really renewing the policy that's in there. So we promote one thing, but how are you really going to support it in the county plan? And I think that's the idea behind much of this and many of these changes is renewing the ideas and how we move them forward kind of to the next phase of planning and redevelopment. Also for resiliency in the recommended practice section, which I mentioned is really aspirational policies, but continuing to support and promote land acquisition, reductions of impervious area, expansion of green infrastructure. Also, one of the things that we did in the policies, which I should have highlighted also, is really supporting cities when they're considering redevelopment opportunities, perhaps considering an alternative or increased FAR, or could we tie density to that if there is a strong resiliency program there. So trying to find ways to promote all of those through a variety of tools. So that was added in, or actually just reinforced and strengthened in the plan. In the intergovernmental, which kind of covers a whole host of topics. Promoting access to fresh food. We hear a lot about this. We got a lot of comments about kind of farm to table last time, but really this is about access, I think, to fresh food and kind of shifting that concept. Consideration of, like when local plans and site plans are considered, the location of grocery stores, access to fresh food, not just farm to table, not just urban farming, but that, just a basic piece of human rights, really. Under policy 2.10.1, this is related to compatibility reviews. This is something, it's kind of, it's been in the plan for a very long time, and it was updated as part of BrowardNext. But what we've seen since that was implemented in 2017 is compatibility reviews are these very limited ideas for allocations of flexibility or redevelopment units. And right now, there's a trigger of if the site's within 500 feet of an ESL or a county park, it could trigger a compatibility review. And when we reviewed plats that could be subject to that, we have just found 500 feet in an urban area. It's adjacency that's important. It's adjacency or connectivity, not within 500 feet. So trying to draw some of that out of the county plan. And like I said, it's very limited that it's used, but it exists. And I think it's an important concept, but it needs to be realistic in its implementation. Ensuring the utilization of parks for emergency operations. There was kind of an odd policy that was like the county should encourage the use, but really what we've seen since COVID and what we plan for emergency operations is the use of these parks for these emergency operation uses. So a modernized policy for that. Policy 2.16.3, and then this trickles down throughout the plan, is we've talked to Ralph Stone extensively about this. When BrowardNext was adopted in 2017, we had 15 years across the board for affordable housing for the commitment. That changed to 30 years. Well, in owner-occupied, we're seeing a shift back to 15 years, and then the at least 30 for renter-occupied. And also on our staff's radar is, can we provide more bonus opportunities if you have a 50-year or 99-year commitment for affordable housing? Because many of these tax credit opportunities already have to make either a 50 or 99-year commitment. So could that translate to more of the private side also? So I think that you may.
You're talking about incentivization?
Incentivization,
Okay.
always about incentivization. Because you want to keep it at least 30, because at the private side, it's going to be more challenging if a private developer is offering a moderate affordable housing tool. 30 years would be it, but maybe the 50 or 90 could become, it could happen. So it could be a consideration of how we consider also bonus formulas. Could that be part of that? We talked about 216.5, including faith-based lands. The consideration of removing will remain publicly owned, so that it has to be ownership. The differentiation between this consideration and what we saw and we see in the Live Local is this is limited to access to transportation facilities and to the local codes. So more conservative that way from what we're seeing at the state. Policy 236.2, this is another modernization. When we're talking about social equity, really just ensuring, like we talked about earlier, access to fresh food, medical resources, services that provide a safe and supportive environment. And that should be a consideration, during the land use process and during the redevelopment process also.
Good, just a question on 2.6.1, 2.36.2, where it talks about access to fresh food. Is there any duplication there that we need to consider when we're rewriting this?
Well, so there are different sections of the policies. So one is just about access to fresh food, and the other piece is really ties into social equity, so it's just a piece of it as opposed to the primary policy. But we can always consider streamlining.
Okay. Any comments?
Just
Mayor Levy.
on the intergovernmental side, and Dr. Zeman has been vocal about the impression that school district property, some of it that they may consider surplus, ought to have ways that those properties could contribute more to the county's goals with housing, for example. Is there a specific policy section that deals with how we can encourage or otherwise guide the repurposing of some school district property, since we all know that at some point, perhaps, they're going to want to take action to, do something different with those surplus properties? So I just want to throw out there that maybe there ought to be something that encourages or facilitates the easier transition to different uses if the application comes through, and just to have something that addresses it and doesn't leave it in limbo, because it is a unique, idea. And so just putting that out there, Barbara.
It's good. Thank you. The other item to be concerned about is 2.6.1. I mean, we look at the access to fresh food, it's obviously very important. And we have to make sure some of our policies don't affect that, right? Because when we cluster very low income, we're not going to get we're not going to get Publix. It's not going to move in. So that's why from this dais, when we get in this conversation, almost every time I get into the mixed income, we really need to promote that. We need the low, we need the workforce, and we need the market rate. We need to have them in the same areas. That's what that's what really allows us to have sustainable communities. And then we get the Publixes that want to move in and the Whole Foods to all neighborhoods in our communities. So just important that we're not adding one thing in one area and have this aspirational approach. Then we're just saying, well, we need so much affordable housing, and I know you hate the word affordable, but attainable, whatever that is, that we cluster very low income that prevents that policy from happening. So, okay, Ms. Blakeboy.
Thank you. The next slide, intergovernmental related to permitted uses section. We took the interpretation that the Planning Council made last year related to the substitution of dwelling units for those of a lesser dwelling unit type. Because we had these 4 cities, the city of Hollywood asked for an interpretation. The Planning Council made that interpretation. What Planning Council staff is proposing is that be applied throughout the activity center category, the swapping out of units that generate fewer students. And that accomplishes a couple of things. This is what we talked about last year with the city of Hollywood, was they were going to have to do a county land use plan amendment to consider a different dwelling unit type. And when we're talking about making things easier, more discretion at the local level, I think this goes a long way, because as we always talk about, local governments can be more restrictive. We maintain it as it is in the county plan, but this policy being in place will give the local governments the tool. We've seen activity centers that maybe have a specific dwelling unit type left over, townhouse units. They're not able to build it. They're looking for higher. They would have to do a county amendment to build a different type. And right now, almost every unit type is a lower generation than townhouse units. So I think that it goes in line with the interpretation that was made last year. So the policy change would allow for that. And then also within the activity center, cleaning up some just language related to high-rise dwelling units, making sure that local governments, it's when you look at the county plan, you understand the unit types that are permitted, besides the substitute language. And then also a cleanup of bonus density formula that is less liberal than the county plan allows, striking through that because the local governments, anyone who has an activity center can use the bonus density formulas. And so they would have been, oh my gosh, I just forgot what the word is. They would have been penalized for that by having it in the county plan. So some cleanup stuff there. We have a pending modification throughout the plan for special residential facilities. It's outdated language, transitioning that to very specific language that's in statute. Dan, Don, and I have been talking about the strategy to address it holistically throughout the plan and streamlining it because our plan is almost over-detailed in how it's presented. So streamlining that and really reflecting the definitions in the definition section, and that would include the density reference, so then it kind of streamlines the plan. Here's a big one. This is a joke. Omitting the mining use from permitted uses. This, I was trying to remember why we did not omit this in 2017. I have no recollection of it. At the same time, the mining policies remain in the policy section because it's important to protect the residents in the cities, but we have this just kind of odd use. We're striking through that. Modernizing residential uses to allow for the integration of vertical, commercial, or office uses for the higher densities. Currently, that's permitted in the 25 and 50, and 16 is office only. We want to expand that to include horizontal on-site integration, because right now it has to be in the same structure. So if you're allowed to do it within the same structure, it makes sense that you can do it within the same parcel without requiring a county land use plan amendment or the allocation of flex. And then there's a rule piece that would follow that in the administrative rules.
That makes perfect sense.
Updating the dash line areas definition. So this is basically from the 77 and 89 plans was to accommodate areas that had golf courses. But what we've seen in recent times and modern times is for parking lots with office buildings. We'll point to Plantation as the primary example of this, but it's been a wonderful tool for the city to use. So changing the dynamic in the plan to really focus that on like less than 50 acres, because if you're above 50 acres, you're likely going to want to be an activity center. There's a chance under 50 acres that you do want to be an activity center, but if you can accomplish it and you know where the uses are going, I think this will be a stronger tool. And we've talked about a higher density being allowed there and an affordability factor for that. And then of the final piece of the residential uses is currently redevelopment, how it stands in the residential uses is only accommodated in the coastal high hazard area. So that's generally for anything that occurred predates the county plan. Well, we have areas throughout the county that predate the county plan that are built and constructed at a higher density. We've seen inquiries, we've seen corrective amendments in cities because perhaps a building can't get insured, maybe they're having insurance problems, but how that redevelopment should be likely applied throughout the county. So we have some proposed language for that. And I would also anticipate that Senator Geller's going to come back with some more language for that because that's also on his radar. And with his 216-4 working group, he's also working on that issue.
Can I ask?
You may.
So I want to go back to the mining. So I'm thinking about what it is that is or couldn't be mined in our area. And one of them is certainly coral rock is being mined, and there's blasting associated with that and all that. And then we've had this scare of fracking in the Everglades and possibly elsewhere. Is that captured, or when you say omit?
It's the mining use on the Broward County Land Use Plan map. So it's the designation. So if you look at the Broward County Land Use map as a corresponding use, there are no areas designated. I don't even know what the color would be. Gray. I know, but gray is transportation. But let's just say it was gray. There's nothing designated on the county map. But that's why I was saying we keep the policy pieces that you're referring to, fracking and mining. We keep that in the
offshore drilling
policies.
and all those other kinds of things that people react to.
So we maintain the policies for the protections that you're talking
Okay.
about, but we remove it from the map that has all the different
Got it.
colors throughout the
Nothing shown
county.
right
Okay,
now.
got it, thank you.
Yeah. Multiple. So these are policy and ideas that kind of, they may be related to densification and transportation, maybe residential and resiliency. So one of these is like I said, just in the last slide, memorializing the dwelling unit substitution for all activity centers. I think that impacts affordable housing. It impacts transportation, it impacts a variety of topics. Eliminate site planning criteria and modernize to promote reduced parking ratios, shared parking, also in the activity center category. We're very heavy there also on site planning, and when you look at, that all falls in the local plan. So we had the site planning criteria, and what are we really trying to accomplish and promote in the activity centers? Let's just keep it simple, that's what's supported by the county plan. Policy 2.5.4, this is related to the preservation of open space to include community and recreational areas, especially on the Barrier Island. I think this is what Mayor Levy was referencing when he was speaking earlier in the meeting. It's an idea, it's a modernization of the protection of lands and other policies that would have to be addressed to do that. Policy 2.10.3, encourage increased density along transportation. We touched on that earlier. Supporting the coordination of local governments and school board for traffic circulation. We touched on that earlier. Supporting the exemption of school impact fees without limitation. One of the things that we talked about months ago when we were talking about the educational mitigation agreements is currently the school board has a max at what they will exempt from fees, and there's a maximum per project. The statute no longer requires that you have to find the matching fund, so we want the county plan to support that there shouldn't be a limit there also. Oh, sorry, back one. Adaptive reuse of non-residential buildings, such as offices, hotels, hospitals have come, are on our radar for this also as residential uses. So supporting that, and then kind of defining, there's a definition of how the policy could be accomplished there, but I think we could take it a step further. And for example, if it's 100% affordable housing, then you don't have to find the foundation residential from flexibility or redevelopment units if there's sufficient facilities and services. So I think we're even thinking about expanding what's drafted today for your next meeting. But I think we're going to see a lot of, not a lot, we're going to see proposals to reuse non-residential uses. Permitted uses section, this is just a modernization of transportation uses because broader than just airport. I think, we see different technologies, drone technology. How can we address that in the county plan to be prepared for kind of like that next phase of development? So this is back to the framework document for a moment. As I said, all of this, when you look through the framework document, that's going to tell you what tab, what policy section, what permitted use to look for, if it's pending, what the status is. A couple of status that I just want to talk about is one is related to the ESL map. And that's part of the natural resource map series of the county plan. And we've talked about this through the years, but as we had it in the framework, I've had continued conversations with the county's Resilient Environment Department about transitioning those policies and that map to a more like the wetlands process. How the wetlands process works now is to go through permitting and licensing, you have your mitigation opportunities, you do this. Right now, if you're on the ESL map, we're in a really, I'm just going to say it here, and anyone that's listening, they're going to probably agree, it's a really complicated time. The way the process, we have two processes that are working separately. We have the county land use plan map, and then we have the permitting piece. Then property owners are permitted to start permitting and licensing, but they may be on the county natural resource map series. maybe they don't realize that right away. Maybe they do, but maybe it's, they're stuck in this permitting process, and then they're coming in behind for a county land use plan amendment. And so they may be 2 years into permitting, and now they're going through this. And now the same staff that's having to accept the application is weighing in on the removal of the ESL site from the county map. It's just it's a conflict of the processes. We understand there's also some support from some commissioners, county commissioners, to kind of facilitate this modification. So I anticipate that that's what we would bring to you, but it may not be formulated for your next meeting, but the concept is going to be there. We're going to continue working this through with the county staff and what needs to be proposed to actually bring that to a reality and make the process understandable for applicants to go through. The second piece is the expansion of residential uses. We had a discussion at the Planning Council last year, and we had added it to the framework, and about recreation open space being used specifically from county parks to be able to use for affordable housing. And we've had pretty extensive conversations with the county park staff about this, and this is kind of a twofold piece. One, there isn't support from the county for that. Part of that was the modification and strengthening of the policy for using these spaces for emergency operations, because that's what we're assuring for the future also. Because one thing we do know about park space is it's at a premium, and it's very challenging and not likely that local governments move forward to acquire additional park space at this time. So it's a static, kind of a static being. There's still a tool. If it was proposed on a park space, it could go through a county amendment. So there's still a tool to accomplish that. But I think, what we're seeing in Live Local, if we're taking that kind of as a parallel, it's something that we should, consider protecting and preserving. To support that, we did provide in the support documents, there's a table of all categories that permit residential uses, either by right or with different tools. And I think what you see there is it's primarily conservation, recreation, open space, transportation uses. I'd have to look at the table. Mining, just kidding. Mining is on the table, but obviously we're considering that. But just to get a visual of, most of the county plan does allow for residential uses. So those are two of the statuses that are on the framework that I wanted to expressly describe today.
Thank you. Mayor Castillo.
Yeah, with this one, I disagree. I think that in an urban county of about 800,000, this would have been a good policy. In an urban county of about 1 million, this would have been a good policy. But when we get into the 2 millions, and when we get into the size of the population of Broward County and the practicality of things like this, I think that there has to be some leeway. And while the conservation of parks and recreation and open spaces is important, a policy that sort of looks down upon the possibility of some shared uses of those parts of those locations is, in my view, just bad public policy. I would never agree with that. I think that there are many, many opportunities in unused corners of existing regional parks and possibly even city parks where a compatible use to housing would be ideal and a better use of that land than currently having it just sit there fallow, unused, and to a large extent unappreciated, frankly. So I don't know that I could support that.
Sure.
Just following up with Commissioner Castillo's comments there, I do think it's, to get outwardly, we're just not going to do that, I think is probably not a good policy.
Mm-hmm.
You see it all over the world where they take parks, put put residential units in it and then create a park on the roof, create open space and other areas where they densify. I mean, I'm thinking of Nice specifically, where they've just done that, because they need to. They have a housing issue, just like we have. So just to outwardly, we're just not going to do something, I think is just, in general, a mistake. So I happen to agree with you. Mayor Levy?
Yeah, so my comments were really toward the aspiration that the land use plan amendment process and just to your point about, the efficiency and the applicant opportunity to know the different aspects of what they need to handle, but also at the same time strive for the process to take less time. I don't know that really it's within BrowardNext that you get into those details, Barbara, and it's rather just really, let's just call it process. I won't use the word bureaucracy. But it takes time to get through this. And so to the extent you all can look at where there could be efficiency for applications, I think that's critical. I mean, just 2 years spending on permitting is 2 years. And I always, even within, municipal, approval times, sometimes I still don't get it on why it takes so long. So please do what you can.
Thank you.
Sure. So we have some draft language that we had already worked on before we talked to the county staff. So we'll
Continue with your draft language. I think it was the right direction.
Yep. Okay. Perfect. We'll do that. And then this is
Or else sometimes the consequence is the state gets in there and starts putting
Right.
timetable limitations, just like they did in that bill that we heard the summary about today. So.
understood.
Yeah, so for both pieces of that, where we've had language drafted and thoughtfully positioned to be put into this plan, let's reactivate that.
Sure. Yeah. It'll
Because I
be-
think you have the willingness of this committee and probably this whole council to see options, for
Okay.
sure.
Will do. And then this is just a talk about what we can expect at the next steering committee, and we can, after I think I go through each of these bullets, maybe talk about strategically what we anticipate.
Perfect.
Which may be a little bit different than I thought before I wrote this. So at the next meeting, you will see all of the items that you have before you today. In addition, each of the highlighted regional issues, which are the 7 opening pieces of the county plan that just really give you a summary of what the what the county is promoting for redevelopment for each of those issues. So we'll have drafts of each of those. A presentation of the implementation procedures, which I don't expect a huge change on because we just went through the amendment last year, but there might be some minor modifications to that. We're still always looking at ways to include opportunities for local governments for additional recreation open space uses, and there may be just a little reformatting for that. The concepts for administrative rules documents, BrowardNext Articles 1 through 6. So right now, we have 1 through 5 in the county plan, in the administrative rules document. And so we have some proposed changes to those. And then 6 would be a placeholder if we needed it for any of the resiliency planning or environmental pieces. And that would not be drafted unless that got transmitted and adopted. Nothing happens with the administrative rules until the conclusion of the policy piece, except for a couple of things that we're going to suggest last month that aren't directly associated with policy pieces that require changes. So you'll see a draft of that entire administrative rules document. Like I said, each of the pieces that are in here today, next month, the difference will be, we'll have a format. I'm not sure if we're going to use double underlining and a different kind of strike through, so you can see what changes from this month. Like the recreation open space piece will probably be double underlined. So you would see the difference just looking at the one page, what was presented in March and what will be presented for April. So that is what it's going to be. So what you have today, plus those highlighted regional issues, plus the implementation, plus the administrative rules document.
Just one more added
piece.
thought, if I could.
You may.
I could support, me personally, I could support a policy that says that existing park space will be respected as park space unless. And then we use the unless to talk about, the achievement of pressing county objectives, unless some other, some other finding or some other showing of justification. It's,
You would need the willingness of the property owner, AKA the county, to
Right,
agree. And so
right.
it's
You
not
know,
all in, it's
so-
not a carte blanche.
all I'm asking is that the door be left open for possibilities that may either presently or in the future play themselves out for that. I don't have a problem, generally speaking,
You don't want absolutes.
I don't, no, not on
And
this.
that- And that's what, and I
We're
agree.
talking
and I
about
think-
land.
And I think
And-
I think those are very good ideas, Mayor Castillo. I just want to say, I do believe what we've already written accomplishes what you're looking for. So I think that's really where we're going. We want to have different options for that. Nothing's mandatory, but there's no absolutes on the other side that you can't. So, council members, did you have your hand? Okay. Mayor Levy.
Just on a different note, with regards to, sometimes I can see where land use, BrowardNext, and the policies that sometimes are artfully, expansive and could be interpreted and taken where people want to take them, sometimes lead to interpretation that's too vague and doesn't provide direction or predictability in what does the county mean by this language. So as we look at this, I think we might want to also look at it as a lens of, do we understand what this means? If it means something but it doesn't say it, let's just say it, or do we want to say that? And have some predictability and not let this be at the whim of an interpreting, person to say, oh, this means this or this means that, or, you could say priority planning area. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean a no? Oh, if it's here, then forget it, there's nothing? No, it means that if it's in a priority planning area, there are things you need to consider. And so I'd like that to be more understandable on what is intended by saying, if all you're going to say is shall strongly discourage 1, 2, 3, 4, or discourage, well, what do you mean? What does that mean? Discourage. It means, okay, you need to consider, these mitigating opportunities. So I know I'm not being very specific myself in the comment, but you get the point, that we want predictability when someone reads these policies to know, what boxes do they need to check, or is the box shut down, so.
Mayor Gomez.
I think what is being said is to get rid of politics out of the policy and just set the policy so everybody clearly knows what we're trying to do for the county.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Blakeboy.
So I think, let's talk about timing for what, the path that I kind of thought we were on. I'm obviously here, everyone today. I had anticipated that we would come back to you with something in April, the second piece with all these pieces. Basically, I have 2 weeks from tomorrow to finish that for the April meeting. And I think also we need to talk about timing and meeting-wise. Did this work today? Do we need to do something different where you have a continuous conversation? So if you could just
Yeah, so
open the
I'm
conversation for format.
I'm going to make a recommendation, and then you all can weigh in. I do believe at our next meeting, first of all the backup is here for us to read and go through. When we get a chance, let's do that as quickly as possible. And then if we have
Please take the books
questions-
with you.
And if we have questions on anything specifically before the next meeting, let's address that directly with Ms. Blake Boy early so she can be thinking about that. Second piece is we do need more time, and we do need to probably invite subject matter experts when appropriate, especially for the resiliency piece where we are. So I do think we're going to need to allocate at least 3 continuous hours that may or may not work the same day we have a meeting. So I'm suggesting if we do not have an April Planning Council meeting, we should use that date to have the steering committee meeting and block out the 3 hours in the morning. If we do have an April meeting, we should probably then look at our schedules and see if we can stay after that meeting for several hours to go through this. Is that,
I was
and I
going
know we're going to
yeah,
miss you, but
well-
you'll be doing your research in Barcelona, but.
Well, what day would that be?
That date is April 24th.
Hold on.
Well, he's checking
Well,
his
he's checking,
calendar.
go ahead,
yeah.
Mayor.
Basically, I think it's a good, I was going to say like a workshop. It needs to be, whether we're doing it here or not, I don't have a problem with formality of stuff, but it does need to be able to have time to get through the nitty-gritty, get our thoughts and chew them out and put out the plan in order to not have this take even longer, which is, I don't think, what you want.
I can
And this-
call in on the 24th.
Okay, and the second part of that is, I do believe we should probably bifurcate what we're trying to do at that next meeting, not try to do it all at once. We should probably have 2 meetings planned for the future, whatever those dates are. I think we should try to look at the big pieces that are the big chunks we've talked about several times, resiliency housing. You know, let's break those apart, so we're not trying to do it all at once. And if that's okay with you, Ms. Blakeboy?
Anything's okay with me, just to be clear.
But I'm just saying, I know we're going to add another meeting, but I think it's appropriate to do that.
So you want to, at the April 24th meeting, regardless of if you have a meeting, the regular planning council, how do you want to break it out?
What I suggested is that we can look at our calendars. I'm not sure everyone has the ability to right now.
Right.
Or you can send out one of your doodle posts, but I would say, if we could, we need to be able to allocate an additional 3 hours to that time for, if it's a meeting.
Okay, on April 24th.
On April 24th.
Okay, and then I have room 430 for some dates in May that I was going to use for workshops, but I
Great.
think we're certainly delaying that. So I have that room available, like May 1st, maybe 14th and 15th, that I could pull you for those pieces. And then we won't set the workshop dates until after that third.
Could you just do your doodle poll with a couple of those dates for us?
I can.
And
I
then-
guess the part that I'm confused about is you only want to talk about on which date, on the April 24th
It doesn't matter, I'm just
date?
trying to say, give yourself enough time, so you're
Okay.
not putting too much on the plate, because I think you see from this group, they definitely want to weigh in on these items before it goes out for public comment. We want to
Right.
make sure that we've had enough time to weigh in, so I don't want to put too much on your plate. You're trying to do all of this when we can just do this.
Okay.
But I mean, it's up to you, I'm not telling you which to do first, I'm just suggesting we
I mean,
break it up
I
a
know
little
that
bit.
I have Dr. Mount for April 24th. He had
Great.
already confirmed that he would be available that
So
day,
that
and
sounds like
Ralph Stone.
resiliency.
But, right, I don't know if we're going to be able to do both pieces of it. That's the only thing I'm,
You let us know
Thinking
what
about.
can be done.
Okay.
And it's okay if we add another date onto this. That's what I was trying to suggest, that don't try to force it into one, because I think we're going to end up just adding another date anyway, so let's plan in advance of 2 more meetings.
okay, then I'm not going to show you the next slide. So it's the roadmap,
No,
it's the
the
date.
bottom line is perfect.
Right.
We're not changing that March
Okay.
date of 2026. That is not changing.
Right, okay, I just think there's going to be a little shift here again. So, so I just want to, here we are.
The bottom line is, we are still push this to, March 26th is still realistic, because we knew going into this that we are going to have some changes. So next spring is definitely realistic. So
Okay.
we're not changing that.
Okay.
Mayor Gomez, I cut you off 3 times. I apologize.
Absolutely no worries. I didn't see it. I agree it should be in some kind of bite-sized ways to do it. However, when you have certain things that, in the multiple, maybe we start with the multiple. I don't know, organize it the best way you think that it'll be able to be most effective. Because we don't want to start talking about housing, but it also affects something with transportation and things like that. So whatever way it will work, you'll organize it, but I do agree, we probably have 2 more meetings after just April's because we care.
Yeah, so the bottom line is, we trust your judgment. We're just saying, we're not trying to force it into one meeting. That's the bottom line. We're not going to tell you how to, but I hear your points where we can. You'll figure it out. You and your team do a great job with that. Yeah, they do.
Okay, great. I'm just thinking.
This is not stressful. This is wonderful.
No, so I think what I would just say is, whatever we plan for those pieces, I'll go through the chair to make sure that he's on, that we're in the right direction.
Perfect.
I don't want to
I will just
disappoint
say,
anyone.
for the resiliency piece, and obviously it would be great to have Dr. Gerardo, I just saw her yesterday. But I will say that, that it takes somewhat of a, I don't want to say an expert, but, the resiliency piece gets into the most, loaded terminology that has consequences that you may not just realize. And so if all we have is Dr. Gerardo, and mind you, she can of course explain things, But I think it ought to be looked at from the planning council lens and the professional staff of what is the impact of everything that's written here, and play out some scenarios and just understand from the goals of housing and transportation and all that we're looking to do, just make sure that, our aspiration for, of course, maximizing the county's resiliency, which is obvious, is codified in a way that is practical and still allows for, the modernization of property, and doesn't just cause a situation where we're resorting to people abandoning ideas of reinvestment because of the, onerous requirements, and therefore we're never going to see properties improve, and they'll just have to stay the way they are. So just, again, we need both sides of the coin.
Yeah, and just Dr. Hurtado's not available on April 24th, but Dr. Mount is from, he's the Assistant Climate Resource.
The point is a very good point. Let's make sure we're looking at all these issues through all the lenses.
And by the way,
Not just one.
kudos and thanks to all of you.
Absolutely.
This is really, this is not easy stuff, and the presentation was just nothing short of top-notch. So I
Agree.
just want to thank you all for the work that you've done.
Agree, wholeheartedly. Ms. Blake Boy, anything else?
I have nothing else. Thank you.
Excellent. Anything else from our committee?
Yeah.
Well, with that, is that a motion to adjourn?
Yes, sir.
We're adjourned. Excellent, thank you. Great work, everybody. Really good input, really good.